Florida forecast is calling for continued stormy economic weather. When will we see a breakthrough? Travel and tourism continue to slump as people keep a tight grip on their money. We'll hear from the experts on their predictions for a turnaround. It's time for Money Talks America. Hi, I'm Sean Snaith, Director of the Institute for Economic Competitiveness in the College of Business Administration at the University of Central Florida, and your host for Money Talks America. There's been a lot of discussion about the shape of this recession. Is it a V, a W, or maybe a U? I don't think it's any of those. I think it's going to look a lot like, well, a gravy boat, and here's why. A U and V-shaped recession imply a very steep recovery. Unfortunately, we're not going to see it this time around. The recovery from this recession is going to be quite gradual, like the tapered spout of a gravy boat. The credit crunch and the trauma that consumers have endured will preclude a very rapid recovery. It's going to take time. The just released IEC forecast shows that Florida is one of the worst faring states in this recession. Florida's massive job losses will continue to accumulate through the end of 2009. Payroll employment in Florida will have declined by an average of 715,000 jobs over the last 3 years. Florida's labor market is the ugly scar that will serve as a reminder of the economic trauma we have endured. And this scar will take a long time to fade. In fact, Florida's payroll employment will not reach pre-recession levels until 2014. The unemployment rate hit double digits in the second quarter of 2009 and will continue to slowly climb into the second quarter of 2010. The average unemployment will peak in that quarter at 10.7%. Many of those lost jobs are in the hospitality industry. Hotel occupancy is running more than 12% below the same time last year, and resort tax collections have dipped 16% in the Metro Orlando area, an area which includes the mega destinations of Disney and Universal Studios. But it's certainly not unique to the rest of the country. Money Talks America correspondent Ed Hyland recently attended the Convention Industry Council's CMP Conclave, where leaders of 4 major meetings associations met to talk about the economy. Ed, what was the feeling amongst the leaders on that panel?
Sean, most of them agree the meetings and travel industry will not see a rebound until late 2010. And even then, things will be very different. Listen in.
You know, after 9/11, it became patriotic to get out there and travel, to get on airplanes and have meetings. You know, it was, nothing's going to hold us down. We're going to get out there. But now we're battling perception, and it's almost unpatriotic to go out there and have meetings.
Larry Luteran is Senior VP for Group Sales and Industry Relations at Hilton Hotels.
From a hotel standpoint, I think, the recovery timeline is well stated. I'm worried about 2010 too. I think 2009, we're going to see a few nuggets at the back end. We're trying to celebrate the successes, trying to stay positive. All of us have had a lot of success over the last several years. One of the biggest challenges we have is staying motivated because we've had success and now it's not coming as frequently, so we have to stay pumped up about what we're doing and what the future brings, and that's a real challenge for us. But 2010 is going to be tough.
Despite the slowdown, Luteran said growth was out there if you had banked resources.
From a hotel standpoint, we're still seeing a lot of growth. We're going to open over 300 hotels this year. Now, there's not a lot of new starts in the business, not a lot of money for new starts, but there were a lot of things that were coming out of the ground that are going to open up. And so we're seeing a lot of that. So you're going to continue to see inventory come into play here from the hotel side. I do think that you're going to see consolidation, more consolidation. There's people struggling out there on the hotel side if you haven't noticed. And typically it's the smaller players, some of the players who have one niche, one market segment. It's a good time to be big, it's a good time to be global, and it's a good time to have distribution across every price point.
And the Hilton VP said his company is focusing less on current losses and more on gaining market share.
From a hotel standpoint, it's all about share. It's all about share. We're seeing anywhere from 30 to 35% decline in leads and booking, but 70% of our business is still out there. So the real key is, how do we move share? You know, partnerships in our space is probably the most overused word in the business, but when partnerships are done well, and I heard the best definition of partnerships that I've ever heard, and that's when two organizations can come together and do something far better than either of them could do alone. And that's the true definition of a partnership. And if we can form partnerships that move share and that truly means something significant for both parties, I think that's where the business is going.
If there is one positive from this recession, Luderin says it has brought them together and given greater recognition to the economic force of the hotel industry. Sean?
Thanks, Ed. Hotels are just one part of the tourism industry, an industry that was among the first hit by the recession and expected to be among the last to recover. Daryl Cronk is Director of Research for the Orlando Orange County Convention and Visitors Bureau. Daryl, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Sean. Happy to be here.
Tourism is under siege here, and the convention business as well is struggling mightily in the midst of this recession. I want to talk about several components of this industry, but the first thing I want to touch upon is this notion of certain cities or locations being blacklisted. It started at the height of this crisis with the president's comments about Las Vegas and how companies were being frivolous and holding conventions and meetings in a city like this. Now, Orlando's been dragged into this muck. What impact is this having, and what is the Bureau doing to address this problem?
Sure. It really started in the fall after AIG, the bailout they received, and a few weeks later they were seen in some very upscale resorts, and that's bad publicity, taking taxpayer money and then going on a trip like that. Unfortunately, that has affected now even companies that have not received bailout funds or TARP funds. They are now concerned about the bad publicity. We are seeing cancellations, especially on the corporate side. Corporations' annual meetings, less so on trade shows and associations, but corporations are canceling just simply to avoid the publicity, the perception that they are meeting in a vacation destination versus in a more serious business destination.
I mean, is there anything that you can do to counteract this perception, or is it just one of these things that we have to wait till it dissipates?
We're certainly working with our representatives at the state and national level. One thing that we're pointing out is that the government per diem for lodging, meals, and incidentals is actually lower in Orlando than any other of the major convention destinations, New York, Chicago, Las Vegas. And so to say you're not going to come to a city, you're going to go somewhere else and end up spending more money, which seems somewhat irresponsible when we're talking about government funds, taxpayer dollars.
I think that's a great approach, because ultimately this is all about the bottom line when it comes to corporations. What about on the convention side? I mean, you book these things out for many years in advance, and the trade shows. How are those impacted by the recession?
The meetings at the convention center sometimes book 5, 10, 15 years in advance. Your large trade shows that get into a rotation and they get on the books years out. Those groups are slowing down their booking pace. They're waiting a little longer before they commit. But what we're really seeing is just a drop in attendance, what we call attrition. Groups that had a certain number last time met in Orlando may be down 15, 20, 30% this time. And it's all tied to corporations cutting back on their travel budgets, looking to save money.
How does this episode compare to, say, the period after 9/11? Is it as severe? Do you expect it to be as long-lasting? Will we recover more quickly, more slowly? What's your assessment?
Yeah. It's probably longer-lasting with a little slower recovery this time around. Of course, the 2001 recession was much milder than what we're in now, and really by the fall of 2001, we were starting to think we saw some signs of recovery, and then 9/11 certainly just dashed any of that. And so what you had was a very sharp drop-off October, November of 2001, but it recovered fairly well in 2002, and then by 2003 we were back on track. This year the recovery will not be that fast. We were flat in 2008, we're down in 2009. There's going to be little growth, if any, in 10, so we're looking at probably a more prolonged recovery this time.
Well, before we talk about tourism and the leisure side of the equation here, what has the fallout been in the industry here in the region? Have we seen closures? Have we seen hotels or restaurants or related businesses shutting their doors?
There's been some, not as much as we may have thought, especially on the hotel side. Our hotel inventories went through a bit of a cleansing over the last 3 or 4 years. Really, after 2001, we saw some closures, and our hotel inventory really hasn't grown in 3 or 4 years. Any openings have been offset by closings, and we've been right around 112,000 hotel rooms for several years. What we have seen is a lot less hiring, a lot less seasonal hiring, some layoffs in the hotel industry, theme parks, restaurants, cutting back hours, furloughs have become very common. So it's affecting the employment, I'd say, more so than actual closures of businesses.
I think the labor markets are going to be one of the toughest things to get over in this particular recession. But let's talk about leisure. Families coming here for vacation, obviously a noted destination for families. These families have lost collectively trillions of dollars of wealth in the form of home equity, trillions of dollars of wealth in the form of retirement and stock market accounts. A vacation is a low-hanging fruit when it comes time to tightening belts at the household level. How big of an impact has this had on that side of our CVB?
Yeah, consumer surveys have consistently shown that consumers value a vacation. They almost treat it as a birthright. They will travel. What they will do is change how they travel. They generally take shorter trips, closer to home. They look to save money by staying in perhaps a slightly less upscale hotel. They change their dining options, so they look to save money. For Orlando, that means we'll probably see an increase in the share of visitors from in-state, from our closer drive-in markets. For the industry, that means shorter length of stay. People come, they take shorter trips, so that's going to impact the hotel industry as far as not filling the rooms, and also rates are just under intense pressure right now, lots of discounts.
So do you guys shift your marketing strategy in the wake of this? Are you focusing more at Florida as a source of visitors?
Absolutely. We look at the drive markets in-state, the Carolinas, Georgia. Really 90% of our visitors come from east of the Mississippi anyway. So we're looking up and down really the East Coast right now.
Now this recession, as severe as it's been, likely the worst since the Great Depression, has been widespread in the sense of its geographic impact. This is something that's affected countries around the world. In fact, 66% of the nation's economies are in recession. How is that impacting international visitors, and is the prospect and the outlook any brighter for those folks?
International has gone into this later than the U.S. International visitation was up nearly 20% in 2008. Very strong, really encouraged by the weak dollar, made it very affordable. However, we saw that failing in November and December when overseas arrivals dipped below prior year levels. For the first quarter of this year, overseas arrivals are down 13% compared to the same time last year. So while the international visitor really was kind of bailing us out in 2008, that strength won't be there in 2009. We're forecasting it to be down about 10% this year.
So let's take a look at the big picture now. When can we expect a recovery in this industry? I mean, when are folks within the industry thinking we're going to start to see a turnaround? Let's start with the convention side and then talk about leisure.
Okay. The convention side probably in 10, maybe even second half of 10. Of course, it's related to things like corporate profits, corporate earnings, and until they start to see that recover, they're going to keep their travel budgets very tight. And so that's going to mean fewer people going to shows, fewer people going to the exhibitions, and it's going to mean some corporations simply canceling their events. So we're looking at probably mid-10 before that side begins to recover.
How about the leisure?
Leisure probably a little bit sooner. Again, more so in the shorter drive markets. Although realistically, after 2001, hotel demand didn't reach 2000 levels until 2004. So if we see a similar recovery period, we could be looking at maybe 2011 before hotel demand gets back to the pre-recession levels.
Daryl Kronk with the Orlando CVB. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
When we come back, a look at the housing market and what the latest forecast says we can expect during the next 12 months.
You need it. You work for it. You want to keep track of it. we're talking about money. Your money.
On the one end, from the supply side, all of our goods go up in price. And then on the other side, our customers have less money to spend.
And Money Talks America is all about what's happening with the almighty dollar.
This downturn's been much different because it's these interest rate sensitive industries that actually brought us into a recession, or at least help prolong the recession.
From politics in Washington.
This will not be, by our forecasters' view, the length and depth of the Great Depression.
To tourists in Texas and Florida.
Corporate booking trends. The good news is we're seeing the cancellations kind of wane off. They're getting less. The bad news is they're not rebooking.
We talked to the policymakers.
A number of extremely knowledgeable people come up with two different diverse views on inflation.
The analysts.
Unfortunately, you put the taxpayer at peril, you put our finances in peril generally, and it's the wrong approach.
And the experts who follow the money trail.
I'm doing this for 25 years, Ed. I've never seen more people looking to hedge their portfolios with gold than I've ever seen before.
Money Talks America asks the questions to which you want answers.
What has the Speedway done, and have you done anything to reach out to the consumer in this particular difficult environment?
Money Talks America, on the web and on your television, but only on UCF TV.
It's time for a program like Money Talks America. I'm Sean Snaith.
No doubt a big part of the dragging economic recovery is the weak housing market, especially in Florida. Life in the Sunshine State is not so sunny these days, particularly if you own a home or are in the home building industry. As Ed Highland tells us, the forecast calls for Florida's housing construction sector to finally bottom out, but deeper than many expected.
The bottom is in sight, yet the forecast is for a stunning 88% decline in starts from the peak in 2005 to the current trough. Housing starts will climb at a very slow pace. In 2012, quarter four, housing starts will recover to 2001 levels, coming in at 166,000 starts in Florida. Sales of existing homes have shown strength in recent months, as the 12-month moving average of sales has been on the rise since August of 2008. However, prices have not yet found a bottom, and until this occurs, we will still have an unstable housing sector. Housing prices in many areas have fallen below replacement cost. A natural, long-run floor for prices, foreclosures, and short sales have caused the housing market to overshoot the bottom, just as it did at the top. The construction sector will continue to shed jobs in 2009 and 2010 at a double-digit pace. Don't expect to see new jobs in construction until the second half of 2011. Retail sales will also contract for the first half of 2009. The second half of the year, Florida's consumers, still punch drunk from the painful combination of home equity stock market losses, will start spending cautiously.
Thanks, Ed. When we come back, I'll have a few final thoughts about the economy and what this recession and recovery just might look like. Welcome back to Money Talks America. More and more data is pointing towards an economic recovery. But what is the shape of this recovery going to look like? As I mentioned earlier, it's not likely to be a V or a U-shaped recovery, but something more akin to the shape of a gravy boat. A tapered, gradual recovery, just like the spout of a gravy boat. It's going to take time for the economy to recover from the wounds inflicted upon it during the worst recession since the Great Depression. Trillions of dollars of home equity and trillions of dollars of stock market wealth have disappeared. This is impacting consumers, and they're being hesitant to spend. This is going to make the process and the path of this recovery slower than many would hope. Here in Florida, unfortunately, it might be slower still. Labor markets are going to be the last of the markets to recover, and a jobless recovery seems to be in the offing. We're looking at double-digit unemployment in the Sunshine State, probably for the next year to year and a half. Once we come out of it, though, the trends do pick up, and we'll be looking forward to the next expansion. We'll see you next time on Money Talks America.
Well, they fly past the ghettos and the factories, riding on the gravy train. All of the places that they really ought to be, riding on the gravy train. Past the coal mines, black and scarred, slaughterhouses and the loading yards, on the gravy train, on the gravy train. There's the lucky little mothers in a luxury car, riding on the gravy train. Never thank each other or the lucky star, riding on a gravy train. What's worse than ingratitude? Worse than a pitchfork attitude, on a gravy train, on a gravy train. Ah, like the anchor-uppers and the hangers-on, riding on a gravy train. Champagne suppers with the daggers all drawn,